It is the Saturday Coffee Klatch with Heather Lofthouse and yours truly, Robert Reich. And we have lived through and managed to survive this week of the Republican coronation of Donald Trump, the convicted felon. And Heather, what are we going to talk about today?
Well, let's talk about that coronation and where the Republicans are. Let's talk about Biden's isolation, literally and figuratively, and also that tech outage.
Well, there is a connection.
I was going to say.
Between all three of those.
Are they connected?
But let's get into the connection. But actually, before we get into the connection, I want to talk about the coronation of Donald Trump.
If we have to.
Because it was a remarkable male chauvinist sort of assertion of power, of dominance, of hierarchy. I mean, if you were a woman voter, would you have found anything in that coronation? And I'm not just only talking about the Trump speech. I'm talking about the people who were invited, the world wrestlers and their Hulk and everybody else that you found to be compatible with your values and your view of the world.
Well, you're asking a good person because I am a woman voter.
Oh,
so
what a
personally, I mean, it didn't, float my boat. But I think so. It is important. There are 3 million more women in America.
Now we're talking about voters?
Yeah.
People of voting age?
Yeah, of voting age. Also, if you think about 18 to 29-year-olds, so this young, important part of the population, of women, when compared to men, they associate as being more liberal by far, if you look at the graphs.
Certainly on the issue of abortion. In states that are Republican states, like Kansas and other states that have had abortion issues on the ballot since the Dobbs decision. And we have Trump, who is virulently anti-abortion, put the people on the Supreme Court that actually voted for Dobbs. And we have now J.D. Vance, who says no abortion even in circumstances of rape and incest. I mean, these two guys are, I think, kind of symbolize the essence of the notion of that's deeply embedded in white Christian nationalism, white male dominance.
Right. And so I don't think it will resonate with a lot of women. Now, abortion wasn't mentioned. It was very convenient how they did it all, but there was so much, as you said, misogyny and chauvinism throughout. I mean, the person that introduced Donald Trump is Dana White, who runs the UFC, who, by the way, was caught on tape hitting his wife and had to apologize for that. They are famously macho. I mean, and as you said on our live that we did with everyone, thank you for tuning in.
Thank you again for tuning in. Those of you did those, but we felt a little bit. I think I can speak for you.
Please,
a little bit, not necessarily guilty, but a little defensive because that speech. Donald Trump was an hour and 32 minutes, and it was drivel. It was just awful.
It was ramble, and it was a self-indulgent, melodramatic waste of an hour and a half. But yes, so thank you to those who watched it. And if we had to do it, I'd rather do it together. But it's been pretty atrocious. Now, whether women will have watched it and make a decision based on that, whether it's undecideds or people who had maybe been decided, pro-Trump and decided I'm actually not. I don't know about that. But I do think that in general, the way we look at voting in the electorate, that women are skewing, pro-reproductive health rights and perhaps pro-democratic. We'll have to see.
The other thing that struck me, just going back to the Republican convention, was the absence of even any allusion to the heroes, the so-called heroes of January 6th. I mean, there were, what Trump normally does is he makes some obeisance to the patriotism of those who were arrested and ultimately imprisoned for January 6th.
No, he steered away.
But he steered completely away from January 6th, completely away from everything. He didn't even mention his favorite topic, which is the stolen election. That did not come up.
Yeah.
So
I
it
feel
was
like
a
there was
kind
a
of a
tiny nod to it, but he followed orders because I'm sure they said this is what's not, his close aide said, let's not mention this. We won't mention Project 2025. Let's not mention abortion. But then he veered off the teleprompter for days. It felt like days
it
and these
was
stories
days.
and these rambles and free form
And the rambles were, classic self, referential, narcissistic Trump. I mean, it was,
I know.
and it was hard to follow a lot of that.
Well, so we've talked about this, but he lives in a non-reality. I mean, he is
Yes,
like we
yes, we've experienced that.
Yes, but really, truly, his untruths that he says, he holds them to be true. And it is this concept of kind of like the developmental stage of a 3-year-old as it relates to how the mind works, not intelligence. I'm not saying that because I believe intelligent, for better or worse. But I do think that the way he lives in this untruthful world is really real for him and not tethered to the truth for the rest of us.
And the idea, the core psychological reality there is that he cannot empathize with anybody else. He doesn't have the capacity to get into anybody else's head in terms of, I'm telling a lie, or
Right.
my version of the truth is not the same truth that everybody else would actually see if they could see reality.
Right, because there are people with brains over there and feelings that I'm recognizing.
But the irony is that if he can go on for an hour and 32 minutes, and if he can get an entire Republican Party to agree with him and make it the test for your republicanism, the test for your being a loyal Trumper, that you believe that Trump is not lying. You believe that the 2020 election was stolen. You believe that the people who raided and rioted on January 6th were patriots. Now, again, he didn't say this, but this is what everybody there believes
Right.
and what he says all the time.
Yeah.
Um,
And that first 20 minutes with him recounting the assassination attempt, which obviously is horrible, but I mean, 20 minutes in this drawn out,
it was
exaggerated, the superlatives, constant the greatest, the most amazing, the most wonderful, the scariest, the worst. It's
well, the classic narcissist, would just think that this assassination attempt was the central event of everybody's life, and would draw it out and talk about it almost endlessly, and then go over and what did he do? He put his arms around the
it was
the fireman, the person who died.
right. So they propped it up with the helmet, and it was his actual, his clothing, and he went over and he smooched.
And he kissed
He smooched, yes, the helmet.
The helmet.
Yeah.
I mean, all of this, it's not just melodramatic. It is really, there is something that is slightly, I believe, slightly sick about
For
all
sure.
of this.
And it's all fabricated. I mean, he's a chief fabricator.
And then talk about fabrication, then you went into the lies. And I counted 25 instances where he used the term invasion. Invasion of America. I mean, this was his central lie Thursday night, that America is being invaded by criminals, by rapists, this is how he started.
By everyone.
This is how he started in 2016. There was Mexicans who were coming here and raping and pillaging and destroying America. Now, the irony is that actually illegal entry into the United States is now down to almost zero. And you have a huge drop, unrelated to that, in murders, in serious crimes all across America. Had been going on. That drop has been going on for years. But he gets away with making these false claims that we have a crime wave, that we have a huge wave of people coming across the border illegally.
It is right. It is fear-mongering. It is smearing. It is falsehoods.
Well, it's over and over and over again.
It's part of the playbook.
But the playbook, again, is not new. This is what Hitler's henchmen understood. You say the lie over and over again, even in the space of an hour and 32 minutes. If you use the term, even the term invasion, over and over again, 24 times, 25 times, people start thinking invasion. We're being invaded. And it's hard to get people back to reality. But that invasion metaphor is part of again, the male dominant warrior imagery.
Mhm.
Trump is the strong man. He's going to protect us from the invaders. So the problem with the Biden administration is the Biden administration is weak. The Biden administration cannot protect anybody from the invaders. The Biden administration has done this and this and this. The other thing, Heather, was all the lies about the economy. In the point of fact, 2.9 million jobs were lost during the Trump administration, the last Trump administration. And you also simultaneously had an economy that generated a huge debt, because $4.8 trillion more of debt because of the Trump tax cut. He said last night that Thursday night, that the tax cut went to everybody. It did not. It went overwhelmingly to big corporations and to very wealthy people. And that's where that huge increase in debt actually ultimately is going to be lodged.
Right. But instead, he said, I was the best back then. Then it's been real bad for 4 years, and I'm going to be the best again. I mean, that was the narrative. He followed the bouncing ball. It was not here on this planet.
But he's a brilliant con man in terms of being able to say it over and over again in a lot of different ways and not be corrected. One of the problems in the background here is we no longer have any neutral, trusted arbiters of the truth. And without any neutral, trusted arbiters of truth, Donald Trump can say anything he wants. Anybody in that Republican Party who says wonderful things about
Right.
Donald Trump, neglecting to say that he is a convicted criminal,
Right.
that he orchestrated a coup, an attempted coup against the United States, that he refused to accept an election outcome that even his own attorney general said was legitimate.
Right. He is the writer of this tale, of this anti-hero. And there isn't. So when you say the arbiters of the truth, you mean journalists? I mean, I feel like there were journalists who really you processed with and through.
Well, journalists
Walter
were
Cronkite
the Walter. I'm old enough to remember Walter Cronkite. I'm even old enough to remember. Some of you may also. Anybody remember Edward R. Murrow?
Of course.
Well, Edward R. Murrow brought down essentially Joe McCarthy.
Yep.
The last demagogue we had in America, serious, dangerous demagogue, carried on the communist witch hunts. But when you have trusted arbiters of the truth, a democracy is much safer. Right now, we are unsafe in part because of that, because we don't have, but also because people are anxious and they want some people want a strong man to relieve their anxieties.
And they want others to blame.
And they want to blame others. They want to blame immigrants. They want to blame everybody.
Easier to do that.
This again goes back to fascism 101.
I know, in these kind of primitive narratives.
And it is a primitive narrative about the warrior chief protecting the assembled group. There were references last night, even in Trump's speech, to the good wife.
I know. He mentioned a couple women. One was a waitress, and one, I forget what exactly it was, but it was, he had to go away for a long time, and his wife was cool with it. She's a good wife. It's like a seal of approval. Oh, sickening.
Well, it's
strength versus weakness and male versus female. I mean, it's all these dichotomies that he's reinforcing.
Each of them reinforces the next.
I know.
And he comes off looking, if you don't understand any context, if there's no truth, he comes off looking fairly strong.
I know. So on the one hand, it's fairly strong. On the other hand, I mean, I just want a diplomat who knows how to give a speech. I mean, this was just rambles and
but it was
stream
rambles,
of
but
consciousness.
It was on and off the monitor. You could tell when he was on, when he was off. J.D. Vance. We touched on this a little bit Thursday night, but I just want to touch on it again. I want your view, because there are people like J.D. Vance who had been very, very substantial critics of Trump.
Never Trumpers. The N is now gone. I feel like it's ever Trumpers.
And Nikki Haley. I mean, these people were fierce critics of Donald Trump. They appear at this inauguration or this coronation of Donald Trump, and they couldn't stop saying wonderful things about him.
Plaudits and worship.
So what is your view? What is going on? How do these people? What's the rationale behind this hypocrisy?
I mean, so I think it's self-preservation. I think they want to survive in politics. So I think the morals are out the window, I guess.
But why survive in politics if you're just going to be undermining democracy? I mean, what's the point of surviving in a political environment you're destroying?
Well, I think they'll be saved. I mean, or they have a conscience and they think this is really terrible, but I'm doing it anyway. I mean, is that what's happening?
Well, how can you with a conscience say this is really terrible and I'm doing it anyway? I mean, J.D. Vance, I thought initially when he was a severe critic of Trump, I thought, well, maybe he's not as bad as I thought he was. I mean, Hillbilly Elegy
but close
was a very right-wing book if you read it.
Did not.
Well,
and haven't seen the movie.
Well, I haven't seen the movie, but the theme in the book is that one of the reasons that so many poor people in Appalachia, or like his own family, were being destroyed is because they had too many handouts.
Yep.
I mean, this country is the most, our form of capitalism is the harshest form of capitalism in the world. Handouts, people are starving in America. We have more people who are sleeping outside who don't have any homes, people who, the rate of child poverty in this country.
And no savings, by the way. And Trump kept saying people are having to dip into their savings as though he understands how the economy works.
But J.D. Vance, I think, is not only hypocritical, but potentially very, very dangerous.
But what do you think? I mean, they're just cynical beyond?
I would like to think that there are some principles there. Maybe they kind of have this means versus ends. I've seen it in politics. I've seen it among politicians. They say, and they rationalize to themselves, well, I'm going to do something that's pretty crummy, that maybe violates my principles, but it's because I need to get the power. And if I have the power, then I could do good things that are more consistent with my principles.
But what if the ends aren't good? What if the ends are, if I have more power, then I have more power, and then I have more money, and then I have more power?
Well, that's what happens ultimately. When you get into these means versus ends conflicts, very often the politician forgets what the ends are. And
Speaking
it's all
of forgetful politicians.
Yes.
Can we please move to a new topic, which is what are the Democrats going to do? What is so many people are now
How did we
out?
Segue from forgetful politicians to the
Joe
Democrats?
Biden.
Yes, I understand.
Sorry.
I just wanted you to be
clear
about.
Sorry. But I do, I don't know if I can take another minute talking about the RNC and Trump. Oh, this was funny. So when you put it on Substack, that come and watch, Heather and I will watch along with you and we'll all watch it together and it'll be less terrible. And the number one comment, did you see this, was I'd rather get a colonoscopy.
Well,
and then 1,000 people hearted it.
Did anybody get a colonoscopy?
Instead of last
watching
late night?
I
would have been faster.
It would have been faster and things would have flown.
Yeah. Exactly. But anyway, really, truly. So what is happening with the Democrats? People are coming out and saying, a lot of people, right? A lot of senators, Tester came out.
They're not that many, but I think it's important to keep in mind that you've got 3 levels of discussion going on in the Democratic Party among Democratic so-called leaders, members of Congress, senators, and others. There is the public statements. Very few have come out publicly and said, I think, what do we have? How many senators now? 3?
I think it's 3. And then we've had, Speaker Pelosi and Hakeem Jeffries who have said, maybe he should, but it's his decision. So there's some waffling.
Okay. So, these public statements are really the least important. They may give you a sense of what the underlying reality is, but they are just the surface. Underlying that is something much more interesting, much more important. And that is what people are saying to each other. And also, even more important, what they are saying to people like Barack Obama and Nancy Pelosi, who in turn are talking to Joe Biden.
Right. Or the people around him.
Or the people directly
Yeah,
around him.
right.
And I think that Biden is, you said initially when we started this discussion, that he is figuratively and actually literally isolated.
With
And
COVID.
and he is getting more and more figuratively isolated. And I've seen this before. I remember it with Bill Clinton, with Monica Lewinsky, because there's more and more of a pileup. And people say, you have got to leave or you've got to do something quite dramatic. And then the people who are immediately around the president say, no, you've got to dig in. You can't listen to them. You've got to be strong. And if you are strong and if you remain strong, you will ultimately win.
Yep.
Now, that was the case with Clinton. He survived, but he was not running for president.
Right. So
at
the
that
tipping
time.
point was kind of different. I mean, it wasn't, are you in or are you out? It
Well, no,
was-
the tipping point, unfortunately, was him confessing
Right.
essentially on tape, very embarrassing for him. But this tipping point, unfortunately, is coming up in 3.5 months, and that is the
Or
election.
before, yeah.
And I think it is time for Democrats, and I hope it happens within the next week, to ultimately cut the cord. I mean, I've been a Biden loyalist, and you've heard me over and over.
Yeah, and we will continue to remark on what he was able to get done.
Not only what he is able to get done and has been able to get done, but I have been arguing that an incumbent president has so much power, and there is so much likelihood that an incumbent who's running for re-election will be re-elected. And that's been, generally speaking, that's been the rule, because incumbents have that much power. And you have here an incumbent president in the form of Joe Biden, who has also won an election over
This
Donald
particular
Trump.
person, I know.
So, there are two big reasons, if you didn't even pay attention to anything else, for why you might want to be in that inner circle, saying to Joe Biden, just
Hang in there.
stick it out, just hang in there. But look at the polls. Now, I'm not a poll watcher. I don't believe in the polls. But if you just look at the aggregate, Heather, poll after poll after poll after poll, it's not just one. And they're using slightly different techniques, and they're making up for each other's weaknesses. These polls are showing in not only nationally, but also in swing states, that Joe Biden is losing by more and more and more.
The trend is not in a good direction.
The trend is terrible. The big donors are withholding their money from Biden. They're saying no more. And there is almost no place, there's almost nowhere Biden could go unless he is so sort of narcissistic, unless he has the same traits as Trump. And he doesn't have the same traits as Trump. So I think that we will see over the next week Biden essentially graciously dropping out and giving the mantle to Kamala Harris.
Interesting. Okay, we will see.
What do you
So he's
think?
running the clock. I mean, I think so too, but it's also he has COVID, so he can't do it right now.
He won't do it right now. Now,
No.
I know a lot of you disagree. You think, because I hear from you, many of you say Biden should stick it out. And I was with you. But the weight of the evidence and the polls and the stakes in terms of actually losing this election are so huge. As many of you know, as many of you saw, if you didn't know already, Thursday night, we just can't risk it.
I know it. Okay, should we talk too about the tech outage that happened, which floored me when I woke up on yesterday morning and it said, planes are stopping and banks are stopping, and you think, what is behind all of what's happening every day that I don't know about?
It's our financial system, our communication system, our transportation systems, and they are all linked up. They are linked up through software, much of it from Microsoft. Microsoft farms out some of that kind of software that is defensive to guard against
cybersecurity.
and that security system has a bug in it. And so all around the world, this isn't just in the United
Yeah.
States, Heather, all around the world,
Oh, I know. They had
we
to
see-
reboot. There was
we see
there was an upgrade.
this is a huge weakness in the system. I mean, Microsoft has too much power, for one thing. If there was any doubt about Microsoft's having too much power, this should resolve
right.
it.
So it's a lesson in
Antitrust
mhm,
and the danger of having so much power in one company.
consolidated.
But it also, I think it feeds the same underlying sense of lack of agency, lack of power, slight paranoia that many people have with regard to this election, politics, the economy, and Trumpism.
Right.
And
Other people are in control, and it's not you.
And
You should
this
be
is,
worried.
and when I hear people, tell me all the time that they think there's a conspiracy about here. When you hear nothing but conspiracy theories, you know that trust has disintegrated to such an extent in the system as a whole that it's dangerous in terms of preserving democracy.
Right.
So that's the connective tissue between all of these stories we're talking about today. I think,
I
you
think
know,
so.
the anointment of Trump, Biden becoming more and more isolated, figuratively and literally, and Microsoft having so much power that it can just a bug in one of the companies that it uses
Yeah.
to.
CrowdStrike, which we had never heard of before yesterday, and all of a sudden, you see.
But that's what I'm getting at.
I know.
I mean, there's so much we don't know, and we don't know what we don't know.
Right.
And it makes people who are insecure and anxious, and that
yeah.
is most people in this economy are insecure and anxious. Makes them even more insecure
I know.
and heightens the anxiety.
Okay. Well, if we have to live this life, it's good that we're in it together with everyone else, having coffee.
Well, we are.
It's a lot.
We are.
It's a lot these days.
Well, it is a lot these days. And I want to just say again, slightly different words. First of all, Heather, thank you.
Thank you for inviting me.
Well, thank you for inviting me.
Yeah.
And it's great to work with you.
Ditto.
It's a source of security. Let's put it that way,
Oh.
since one of the issues is security.
Yeah.
But I want to just say something in terms of these dark days, and they are dark days. If you're a progressive, if you believe in the common good, if you believe in social justice, if you believe in equal opportunity and equal voting rights, these are all issues that we are seeing threatened in very fundamental ways. If not by Trump, then indirectly by all the big money in politics. What I want to say is that the only and best, and really ultimately the only way to solve this crisis with regard to our democracy, is to be active, not to fight the other side. No, to be activist in pursuit of these fundamental ideals. And I know how dark it is and how pessimistic some of you are. But I want to urge you to have the faith, to make sure that you understand historically, we do get out of these positions, these terrible, sort of grim situations. And Heather, you know that I sometimes go back to 1968 in terms of the grimmest situation in my history. We do survive, and maybe sometimes we get stronger because of it. So be activist. Don't assume that politics is a spectator sport. It is not. And don't lose your spirit and lose your faith.
Thank you for saying that. It's helpful.
We'll see you next Saturday.